It's not TV, it's HBO, which was Home Box Office's slogan for years and years. The digital age runs from 1976 to the present, and Home Box Office has been a big part of that. Now, obviously, they started they helped usher in the cable age of television, but you've got to realize that they've been able to pivot for this new era, and they were a bit of the power curve with offering streaming options. First, it was called HBO Go, then HBO Max, and now it's simply called Max. HBO led Emmy nominations and wins for 17 of the last 20 years. They've had some stiff competition from Netflix and Hulu as of late. In 2020, which not coincidentally was the beginning of the global COVID 19 pandemic, Netflix set a record with 160 nominations. 2 years later, in 2022, HBO and then HBO Max received 140 nominations, and this year, 2024, Netflix received 107, Hulu 93, and HBO 91. HBO's first signature drama was The Sopranos, created by David Chase. I'm going to take you through kind of a brief history of their top 10 shows per Rotten Tomatoes critical aggregate website. Number 10, Sex and the City. The Sarah Jessica Parker and the other three leads made this show kind of a phenomenon. There have been two feature film extensions of the franchise and also a continuation slash sequel series called And Just Like That. So, according to Rotten Tomatoes score, that's number 10. Number 9, Curb Your Enthusiasm. They just aired their series finale within the last year. Larry David, who co-created Seinfeld with Jerry Seinfeld, is everybody's favorite misanthrope, and this show, it's one of HBO's longest-lasting original scripted Well, it's not really scripted. What they do with Curb Your Enthusiasm is they write an outline, and then all the actors they hire, their main cast and their guest actors, are good at improv and riffing. So Larry David creates an outline with his writing staff for each episode, and then it takes a little bit longer to film an episode because there's no script per se. My best friend's wife was actually a transcription logger for the season. They shot half in LA, half in New York. So it was funny. They didn't have HBO at the time, but she asked me that season, which take did they end up using? She said working with Larry David was like a master class in comedy. So the show's very not politically correct, very anti-woke, but it's also very funny and very crude. Speaking of funny and crude, we have the Larry Sanders Show, one of HBO's early comedies. It was set behind the scenes of a Tonight Show type late night talk show and starred the late great Gary Shandling as Larry Sanders. Jeffrey Tambor played Hey Now Hank, who was the sidekick, who obviously was patterned after Ed McMahon, and then Rip Torn played Larry's producer, and Rip Torn passed several years ago. But again, very, very funny, very insightful. If you watch an episode of the Larry Sanders Show, you'll never look at a late night talk show quite the same way again. Number 7, Big Little Lies, an adaptation of a popular book. Ensemble cast including Oscar winners Laura Dern, Reese Witherspoon, and Nicole Kidman. And Zoe Kravitz, who was an up-and-comer at the time, was also in it. I watched an episode or two. It wasn't my jam, but I'm not the target audience either. So, there. Silicon Valley. About a bunch of male computer programmers in Silicon Valley. Again, HBO's, all their signature shows are rated R for either sex or violence or language, but this show had a lot of language. I had a layover in San Francisco International Airport once, and I was eating at a restaurant, and a dude comes up and says, "Hey, do you mind if I share the table?" And I'm I'm gregarious, so I said sure. And so we exchanged. What do you do, college professor? What do you do? I work in Silicon Valley. It's like, okay, I've got to ask, is the show accurate? And he said, they take it a little too far sometimes, but for the most part, it's kind of accurate. So, which is kind of funny. Um, the number five is Veep, starring Julia Louis Dreyfus, who has won a ton of Emmys for Seinfeld, and then for New Adventures of Old Christine, and then for Veep. One of my classmates from grad school, Tony Hale, great guy, strong Christian. We ended up at the same church in LA. But it's about a vice president played by Julia Louis Dreyfus, hapless, with a very crazy staff. And you rarely, if ever, saw the president. But again, devastatingly funny, extremely crude, lots of foul language. But there have been Washington insiders who said, it's pretty accurate, including the foul language, which is kind of depressing. Number four, Deadwood, created by David Milch. Um, I never quite got into Deadwood, and I gave it a try. I might try to go back to it one of these days. It's a western. Deadwood is a real town. There are some real life people mixed in with the fictitious characters, but this was Timothy Oliphant's kind of big break, and Ian McShane played Al Swearingen, who was bad guy, but a really classy bad guy. And the way that Milch's dialogue was very elevated and almost Shakespearean in terms of how he constructed it. So they did, I want to say it was 3 seasons in a wrap up movie. Uh, Game of Thrones. Oh boy, my nickname for Game of Thrones is Sex and Dragons, and it's been HBO's recent big, huge hit, which they're turning into a franchise. The first spin-off, it's a prequel series. House of the Dragon is on. The next season, third season, will be its last. And I watched all the seasons of Game of Thrones. I felt bad about it because this has some language and violence and sex. Basically, everything your mom warns you about. Uh, the production value on this show is amazing. They had, especially toward the later seasons, they had up to 5 units, 5 principal photography units shooting across 3 continents. So even though everybody was not happy with the storyline for the final season, season 8, and part of the problem is the author, George R. R. Martin, who wrote the books, wrote 5 of them and hasn't finished the series yet. And HBO's like, well, we need something, so our writers are going to make up something. And a lot of us were not happy with, especially how that last season ended. Uh, and Martin, I don't know if he's got ADHD or what, but he really needs to finish those books. The sequel series that are coming up and the spin-offs are based on books he's written. But basically, it's about palace intrigue and power plays and, dragons and sex and people vying for the Iron Throne. So I can't, in good conscience, recommend it, especially for my student at an evangelical Christian school. Um, Season 1, especially, there's a couple of episodes throughout the series because nobody's safe. Main characters die, sometimes in very gruesome fashion. But like I said before, the production values are extremely high, and you'll believe dragons can fly and roast people alive. Number 2, The Sopranos. Sopranos, um, it's one of my favorite HBO series over the years. But the late James Gandolfini plays Tony Soprano, who is essentially a depressed mobster. In the pilot episode, he has a panic attack, which sends him to therapy, and he has an extremely dysfunctional relationship with his mother, Livia. In fact, at the end of season 1, she has put out a hit on him, and then he was going to return in kind, but she has a stroke. In real life, the actor who played Livia Soprano, Nancy Marchand, died before season three, and they actually managed to cobble together a performance using only using outtakes and digital manipulation. So she got with her state's permission, she's in an episode after she passed. But I watched all the seasons of The Sopranos. Um, Again, sex, violence, language. Um, the first half of the final season, it went 6 seasons. For my money, 6.1 was better than 6.2. And again, several main characters do not survive the series, but it has gone down in fame or perhaps infamy. The final episode doesn't end, it literally just stops in the middle of a scene. And I had guests watching the show, and they're like, "Did your cable cut out?" It's like, "No, I don't have cable." "Did your satellite cut out?" It's like, "No." And that would, some people, there are a lot of people who debate what does the ending mean. Um, but they did make a prequel film. The I haven't seen it yet. I should probably check that out one of these days. And it got mixed reviews. One of the things about television, especially, is a lot of shows that were not intended to become a franchise end up becoming a franchise. So that there was an attempt to try to make a Sopranos type franchise with this prequel film, and it was released theatrically, but it didn't do well enough to warrant continued reboot or sequel prequel efforts. And number one is The Wire, an amazing, amazing ensemble cast. That's a very young Michael B. Jordan. That's Idris Elba. Uh, that was one of his big breaks for American audiences. And then that's Wendell Pierce, who has had a prolific film and television career. Um, he was on another terrific HBO series called Treme about New Orleans post Hurricane Katrina, and it looks at crime in Baltimore, but each season takes a slightly different perspective on it. So we look at it from, perhaps the reporters or the school system or the police department. So just really well done, well beloved and respected, critically acclaimed series that helped make uh, a lot of actors kind of put them on the A list. It's so fun seeing really, really, really young Michael B. Jordan in this. My introduction to him was on Friday Night Lights. One of these days, I need to go back. I've seen some of The Wire. I like it quite a bit. I didn't catch the wave when it first appeared, so it's one of those things that I need to go back and look at. But that ran a total of 5 seasons.